Chapter 4, or Betrayal. I didn't get to stay with the humans forever. One day I was in my box with Rags, and then, on the next, I was being placed into another box and jostled off into a big moving thing. I called for the human who had cradled me against its face, but there was no reassuring coo, no pat on my head. I heard the confusion of the others from my colony. No one wanted to leave the strange place we were just in. We were all scared of our destination and felt helpless because we did not have a choice. The moving thing halted. There were a couple of loud, unfamiliar noises, then sunlight and cold hit my fur. I turned around in my box and saw the brick building that loomed over my colony, and I felt afraid. Excuse me. A few humans took turns dumping the others from their boxes, careful not to let their paws get too close to bared teeth and hissing mouths. But when it came to me, a human opened up my box and lifted me out by the scruff of my neck. I begged for it not to let me go, anywhere but here. But the human made a few noises, scratched me behind the ears, and gently placed me onto the ground. The others slunk towards the colony, but I stayed where I was placed, shivering in the cold. The humans climbed back into the big moving thing and went away. I called for them, but I knew they couldn't hear me. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. I sat there for such a long time. No one came over to investigate. As though they had never left, the others blended back into the colony, but I couldn't shake the memories of that other place. I wished I were there instead of here. After a while, I gave up wishing for the humans to come back. My eyes searched the crowd for mother, brother, and sister. I was angry. Why hadn't they come to me? Was mother sorry for what she'd done? Had they noticed my absence? Soon, the anger was replaced by deep sorrow. Things were so much better when we were small. I made myself into a tight little ball and dreamed of winged insects. When I awoke, it was because a paw batted me. Startled, my hackles sprung up. I hissed and swiped at the air. A familiar scent made me stop. It was sister. She came to me. I nuzzled her face. She smelled sour, like something was wrong. I wanted to tell her of the place I'd just been, but she was preoccupied with sniffing me from head to tail, lingering around my mouth. I know she smelled the food I'd eaten and the scent of the humans who handled me. She was not glad to see me. She didn't inquire about my eye. She only cared about the food she smelled in my breath. I felt a heaviness in my chest. I moved away from her and re-entered the colony, searching for my brother and mother. I decided that if they would not come to me, I would go to them. I wove in and out of the bodies, noticing how much softer my fur was compared to theirs. I wished the humans would come back and take more of us away, even if for a small chunk of time. I found brother. He was skinnier than I remembered, and I wonder how long it had been since I'd seen him last. I went to him and tried to greet him, but he hissed at me as though I was a stranger. I recoiled. I wanted to remind him of how things used to be, because it seemed as though he'd forgotten. But his eyes were dim and I heard the gurgling in his belly. I knew how it was to have those hunger pains. I would have given anything to make the twisting of his gut stop. I nuzzled his face. The sound of his breathing was labored and raspy. He had the smell of the one I had lain against before the humans took me, and I was worried. I went to the food bowls, but they were empty. I went back to brother and tried to coax him to come with me, but his body went limp and he collapsed onto the ground, nostrils twitching slightly. To keep him warm, I snuggled close to him. I looked into his eyes, and for a second, he looked the way he did when we were young and the weather was nice and there was plenty of food for us to eat. Then his eyes closed and they never opened again. I went to sister to let her know of the awful thing that had happened, but she seemed disinterested. Distressed, I looked for mother. Surely she would want to know. She would have to care. I was scared of finding her, terrified of losing my other eye. What happens when one loses both eyes? My mind could not fathom such an event, and I shook the thought from my head. I searched the faces of the others in the colony, once, twice, and then once again, but could not find Mother. I went back to where Brother lay prone and wept into his fur. No one comforted me. I stayed with Brother until the odor wafting from him became unbearable. Then I slunk away from the colony. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I wasn't wanted, nor did I want to stay with the others who didn't care when one of us went missing. I didn't want to stay with the others who would not try to rouse me from permanent slumber. Sister came to me. She had caught a scurrying thing and carried its limp form in her mouth. She dropped it at my feet and made a sound, encouraging me to eat. I was not hungry, but not knowing where my next meal would come, I took a few bites anyway. She finished off the dead thing, leaving nothing behind but bones and a few bits of fur. When I turned to leave the colony, she followed behind me. She was bigger than Brother was, even bigger than the oldest in our colony. I suspected she was a good hunter and had managed to find a good deal of food since I'd been gone. But why didn't she share with Brother? I pushed the question from my mind and paddled along the road we used to take when we were smaller. Sister found a few bites to eat along the way and stopped to nibble before running to catch up with me. There was a bright light coming from a house. The light looked familiar, like the light where the humans had taken me. I went towards the light and Sister howled. She didn't want to go towards the light. I continued on, wanting desperately to escape the biting cold. We climbed the steps and huddled together near a small opening where warm air and the delicious smell of food escaped. Sister shivered uncontrollably and began to cry. The warm air felt good but wasn't enough to ease the ache in her bones. To comfort her, I tried to mimic the cooing sounds of the humans. There was a creak and the door behind us opened. 3 humans, 2 big ones and 1 small one, were standing there staring down at Sister and me. Sister scurried down the steps and away from them, but I looked up at them and continued to coo. Maybe they would help us. The small human reached for me, and one of the bigger humans grabbed its paw. A few terse noises were exchanged, and the small human ducked behind one of the bigger ones. The big humans went inside, leaving me and the small one standing there, eyeing one another. The humans returned with a box and set it down before me. I jumped inside and was elated to find myself completely surrounded by rags. I burrowed my nose in them, relishing their feel against my whiskers. I stuck my head out of the box and then called for Sister. See, I wanted to tell her, they aren't all bad, but she was long gone, spooked by the humans' arrival. Feeling sad again, I burrowed underneath the rags. The small human lifted me up in my box and brought me inside with the light and the heat. I felt myself growing tired. A small tin of food was placed in front of me, and I didn't fall asleep until after it was all gone. When I awoke, it was because I felt as though I was hanging. I opened my eye, and I was upside down, my back limbs tied up high, my front ones dangling. The floor seemed far away. Confused, I cried out. There was a human nearby, but it was not one of the 3 who had boxed me up and fed me. It was another human with a funny smell and a voice deep and not at all pleasant. The human poked me with a stick, making my body swing to and fro. I wailed, clawing at the air with my free paws, trying to free myself from where I hung. The human made another sound and poked my belly hard, sending me swinging, nausea rising up to my throat. I wailed and wailed, but the human kept jabbing me, making me swing. Whatever kept me suspended in the air dug deeper into my flesh. Faint from dizziness, I closed my eye to calm the waves. I smelled the human's face close to mine. I clawed at whatever I could reach, my nails digging into its flesh. The human cried out, and I held on tight until I felt my hind paws come free. I dug all 4 sets of my claws into the human's face, our wails of fright commingling into the night. Suddenly, All the lights came on, and the two big humans and the smaller one were in the room with us, and everyone was yelling. I backed into a wall, hissing. The bigger humans were yelling at each other, but the small human approached me. I felt sick. I felt myself bleeding where I'd been tied up, and I didn't want to feel pain anymore. I ran out of the room and down a flight of stairs. Heart beating wildly in my chest, I raced around trying to find a way out. A big human ran down the stairs behind me, flung open the front door, and with a painful kick propelled me into the night. I ran as fast as I could until I couldn't run anymore. I walked along rows of buildings, each radiating a bright light. I veered away from those lights. Humans could not be trusted.